All right. Happy Friday. Happy to those of you listening live and happy to those of you that will be listening to the recording. I am so excited this Friday with the guests that we have. I think it's going to be an incredible conversation. I think that we have an amazing topic. And I really just first off want to say I appreciate all of you that are listening and joining us live. You could be anywhere, but you're here with us today on a Friday. And I really appreciate it. And I know that my guest appreciates it as well. So today we're going to be talking about storytelling in the workplace. And we're going to be talking about myths that hold us back from connecting, engaging, and communicating. And, telling stories can be powerful, incredibly powerful, right? It can help you inspire, help you build rapport, help you align with others, and ultimately help you achieve whatever goals you want to achieve in your business or with your team. And so this week we have the amazing Jennifer Samuel Chance joining us. She's an amazing storyteller and coach. And she's going to be talking about and unveiling the truth about storytelling in professional settings. Jennifer, can you please introduce yourself to those listening and those maybe catching the recording?
I guess I will, so people know who on earth is talking. So thank you very much for allowing me to be on your show, Akua. My name is Jennifer Samuel Chance. I also go by Miss Jen, because Jennifer Samuel Chance is a wonderful but very long name to remember. Originally from London, England, but been living in the United States many decades. And I spend most of my time now working in the world of storytelling, public speaking, and coaching. And bottom line is this: I work with reluctant leaders. I'll explain that in a minute. Reluctant leaders who, whenever they step on stage live, they want to make sure they have audiences hanging on the edge of their seats. I say reluctant because there are many leaders, whether you work with an organization, whether it's your own organization, and this public speaking thing, you rather not do it for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
You may delegate somebody else to do it, or you just don't want to do it, period. So my work, my evolution as far as being a storytelling speech performance coach is that I've seen time and time again how organizations grow when their leaders stand out front, and sometimes are the face of the organization. So that's why I say reluctant, because yes, I work with people that do other things too, but my specialty is really working with those that really don't want to speak. But by the time we finish with the process, it allows you to be very competent, be very open with your communications, and often leads to other opportunities you never even knew were there. So that's what I did.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Can I call you Jen? I love that.
Go ahead and call me Jen.
Yes, yes, I absolutely love that. And
Go ahead.
Before we jump into some of the questions that I have, and I just want to make sure everyone listening, if any of you have any questions, anything you want to share from your experience, feel free to raise your hand. I'd love to bring you on stage to be a part of this as well, right? Recognizing that this is for you. I did want to share a quick unscientific poll that I did on LinkedIn. And I will say I'm actually quite surprised at the results, Jen. And so I asked, do you know how to use storytelling in the workplace? 37% said yes, 17, and I'm quite surprised because I feel like when I have conversations with my clients, the majority of them say no, they don't. But maybe this is because this is public facing, but 17% said no, and 47% said kind of. Are you surprised at the results of my unscientific poll?
Well, no, not really. What a lot of people share with me is when you ask that question, they know the what. They know why, they just don't know the how. So that's why I come in. So they know they should storytell. They know they should speak. They know kind of what to do, because if you have Google anywhere in your presence, you'll have more than enough information to kind of give you the basics, the framework, etc. But where I come in is the how, because you could read the best book on certain topics, but there's certain things that require certain touches that an independent person, doesn't necessarily have to be me, an objective view, a technique, a way of showing up. So I'm not surprised at all. And there are people that probably do it much more than they actually realize. They didn't know it was a thing. They just think, oh, I just tell stories, or I just have conversations, or I just do this. And my approach is basically, we'll do it with intention. And if you have a certain goal or a certain aim in mind, then just be very cognizant as to how you use story. Your goal gets you to your goal much, much faster and easier.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the how. All right. So let's say it's one of these leaders that maybe responded to this poll and they said, I kind of know how to use storytelling. Where would you recommend they start?
Okay, so first question I would always ask is, what is your intent for using storytelling? Because my wheelhouse, of course, is I've been a professional speaker for 24 years. So live events, even online events, virtual summits and all that kind of stuff too, storytelling, of course, plays a great big part because it provides context to whatever it is you're presenting. And I also say it's like a trifecta, which means the connection between you, your audience, and whatever it is, subject, story, service, whatever product you're attempting to persuade them, influence them to buy. Those three things, story, you, and the product, that's the connection. So when you start, the first question I ask everybody I've ever worked with is, what is your intent? Why do you want to use stories? And in many cases, I would probably say about 80% of them, the answers I get are regarding, I have a speech coming up, I have a presentation, or I'm going to be leading some meetings with my team. So how can I use stories in that field? There are actually are quite proficient as speakers, how to their peers, or perhaps mentors or people outside of their comfort zone that they want to approach. They may not feel that they have enough information or knowledge or whatever it is to offer in those conversations. So that's where stories come up, because you can use a story, a short metaphor, an anecdote to connect to whoever it is you're connecting to. And again, that goes so much further than you sitting there trying to quote facts and figures. So there's many things. It depends on what you intend it for.
Oh, I love that. And I actually love how you even brought up where maybe some leaders, maybe especially reluctant leaders, tend to start quoting facts, quoting data. What stops people from actually sharing stories and, analogies and using metaphors to really connect?
Themselves. And this is kind of a hard one, because I realize, especially with leaders are amazing creatures. I am one, you are one, we're amazing creatures. And we usually have accomplished great things in life. Sometimes a lot of adversity, sometimes a lot of success, depending on sometimes your upbringing, depends on your environment, sometimes on your culture. Sometimes it's praised when you share your stories of triumph, but not necessarily that you get rewarded when you share those stories of adversity, because it may be observed as if it's a sign of weakness. If you messed up at one time and here you are, the shining leader on top of this heap, and if you admit anything that you've done wrong or a sign of weakness, it could be perceived as something bad. I will say, though, I have noticed in the last, I would say 10 years or so, that has changed tremendously. And especially with what the world has gone through in the last 3 to 4 years, what I find is people want real people to relate to. So when I've done workshops for leaders, per se, I ask them, and I'm just going to use the pandemic as an example. Many of them, unfortunately, were organizations that didn't survive the pandemic because business fell down. Some did. So I said, okay, well, those of you that did survive, have you been showing up to your staff? And one particular person, he was from Italy, because there's sometimes, and again, this is a very big generalization, so don't write me a letter or send me an email, where the culture of machismo and being strong and tough is sometimes very, very prevalent. Nothing wrong with that. I actually love it. But he felt a little uncertain about admitting any kind of weakness, the fact that he was scared of the uncertain future that his organization had. So we talked through that. And ultimately, we worked a little bit on a small story of what he experienced as he was going through the pandemic. And then what he did was actually brought on stories and made it kind of a sharing session with his staff to have them open up and share their fears. And that was such amazing glue that brought them together, that they kind of, went together and says, okay, we've been through this, we survived. Now let's take all of this, what we've learned, and go further. So, again, people are sometimes scared. I will also say this. There's a lot of people that don't think they have any stories, which is amazing until they find out, yeah, they do. Because sometimes when you hear story, it's thought of in an entertainment type of capacity.
Right.
And you may have gone through amazing things, you went through a tremendous adversity, there's a massive story that goes around it. So if you've gone through day to day, you've worked your butt off literally to get to where you are, and there's nothing earth-shattering, but it's just small events that have led up to success. People may feel that, who's going to want to hear that? That's not really important. And they say they don't have stories. I always say this, and I use this as a wonderful example. There are stories that you may think are so small, who's going to want to, pay attention to that? So I say, okay, I give them an exercise where I ask the question, did you get up out of bed this morning? And they're like, yes. Did you go to the bathroom and maybe look at yourself in the mirror and go, ugh? And they say, yes.
Wow.
Did you brush your teeth? I say, yes. Okay. Alrighty. So you may think that series of actions that you took, no big deal. It's a routine that you do every single day. But imagine if you put that story, and probably you would lengthen the story to include some other stuff too. But imagine you sharing that story in a business setting or in an other organizational setting. And there may be somebody there that's paralyzed from the neck down. Maybe they were in an accident or had something else happen to them, where they would give anything on this planet to be able to get up out of bed. To get up, to go to the bathroom, to look in the mirror, to go, ugh, and then brush their teeth. So they're going to live vicariously through you. And I think our job as storytellers and leaders is to do the best thing we can to present those stories in a way that is easy for the audiences to receive. We can't worry about what it's going to do to them. We can't worry about whether it's important enough, because that's not our job. And 9 times out of 10, usually the stories that we don't think are important, or sometimes the stories we don't even want to share, are the stories most people need to hear. They need to hear that. Kind of like my Italian leader. His staff needed to hear the fact that he also felt scared during the pandemic. So that's what I say. People, we get into our heads and we start, just going to town on, oh, who's going to do this? And we overthink things. Versus, okay, here's information, here is a situation that happened to us. Let's work it to see if it's going to fit my intent for sharing the story.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that and for sharing some of those specific examples as well. And so what I hear, at least with that first leader, that fear of being judged, right? Not wanting to be vulnerable. With the second one, sort of like, oh, fear of, this story isn't impactful enough, not big enough.
Right.
It doesn't maybe have that hero journey. What other myths do leaders tend to believe that hold them back from being able to share stories that keep them from engaging and being able to communicate as well?
You've got to be perfect.
Perfect.
Got to be perfect. They may look and listen to a professional speaker or somebody that's had training and think, well, I'm not as good as them, so I don't know if I could go out there. And you know what? Their fears may be valid. However, if they're trainable, then all of those fears in some way or another can be addressed and they can learn the skills. I would say great speaking is a learned skill. There are some people that come by it naturally. They have the gift of gab. They can talk your ear off. They really can. And it's easy for them. They don't feel nervous. They can just go off and rattle stuff off. I will also say this. I have actually several clients that are like that. Sometimes the challenge, though, is that they have too much to say. Too much. And it's not necessarily organized. So imagine the audience. Sometimes it may be like you're drinking from a fire hose with all this information, knowledge coming at you. You're like, what? Look, what she said? Huh? And you can't settle down and truly listen to what the person is saying. So you don't have to have the gift of gab. You can learn this stuff. And if you tend to be more on the introverted side, which means, the information you choose to give is short and sweet, your stories may be short and sweet, then that's great. I will say that then you learn how to expand. And I say you learn, you will discover, etc. I have a huge framework that I developed over all of these years to help people really chunk and break everything down to its bite-sized pieces so that okay, I need to ramp up this particular story and provide more details this particular way. And then you go ahead and do that. And then you practice, and then all of a sudden you're giving, I would say, holding court by giving amazing stories that people are just like, oh my gosh, she's so good, he's so good. And they have no idea, how you've been doing. I would say it's like a swan on water.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you look at the swan on top of the water, it's just gliding, without a care in the world. And nobody knows how hard that swan is really paddling underneath.
Right.
Speaking is the same way.
I love that. Absolutely love it. I love it. So that myth of, worried of being judged, myth of not being vulnerable, wanting to come across as strong, myth of my story isn't story enough, myth of speakers are born, not made.
Yeah, definitely can be made. I shouldn't say that. That sounds, yeah. No, I don't mean to say made. I just mean to say, again, it is a skill that can be learned. Story is one of the most powerful vehicles you can use. It is not the end all and be all, because there are times when you're giving speeches, presentations, that you need more than the story.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it goes back to my original answer I gave a couple of minutes ago, as in, what is your intent for sharing the story? There are times when it may behoove you to go ahead and share a story to break the ice.
Right.
Or to, again, provide commonality, which means the end goal isn't to have a speech that sells or influences. So again, you have to just ask the question first, why am I telling this story? I don't know about you, and I'm going to ask you this question, Akua. Do you know people that have stories that it's their favorite story, their favorite, and no matter what the situation is, they're going to tell that same story again and again.
Oh, definitely.
And again.
Definitely. And even in my personal life, I have some friends who like to tell specific stories. Yes.
So I have no problem with that at all. However, if you are listening to this in any way, shape, or form, and you're guilty of that, then just ask. Oh, I didn't hear you.
Okay, great. Then perfect.
We'll move right along.
I think, yeah, I was just asking we were, I think, talking at that point about stories, and I was saying, yes, I have friends who share some of the same stories over. And I don't think I heard your response, but I'm pretty sure the rest of the audience did.
Okay.
So once again, just want to remind everyone who is listening live, if you have a question for Jen, you are more than welcome to raise your hand and join us on stage. Also, if you have any experience you'd like to share, I would love to welcome you on stage as well. So just feel free to raise your hand and we'll bring you up here. Jennifer, I think you maybe said there was maybe a question you wanted to ask me. I'm not sure if that's where we ended.
just to ask your experience with stories, because I know that you've had an amazing journey to where you are right now. So if you had to do the poll that you gave to others, where would you fall?
Great question. I would say kind of, I think.
Okay.
And that's simply because I fall into that camp of leaders who feel like they don't have any good stories to tell. I feel like maybe because I now work sort of in this online space, and a lot of the individuals you see in the online space, especially those who are more of the course creator space, they tend to have this zero to hero story. And I don't really have that. I don't have a rags to riches story. I don't have a zero to hero story. And so there's definitely been situations where I feel like, talking about, how I grew up, the things I had access to, the resources I had access to, even before starting my coaching consulting practice, doesn't seem like it fits, because a lot of the stories tend to be these incredible stories of overcoming challenges. Not to say I haven't overcome any challenges. I just feel like, and this is something I tell my clients, like, oh, comparison, is a thief of joy. You shouldn't compare, but it's hard not
There
to.
you go.
It's hard not to.
Mhm.
So I would say kind of. There are certain situations where I feel very comfortable sharing. Of course, when I do one-on-one coaching, I'm not typically sharing stories, because that's not usually the best space to do that. And the modality doesn't really call for you sharing your personal stories. But with my facilitation and workshops, sometimes I feel comfortable
Right.
sharing. Usually I try and create the psychological safety so the actual participants share. That I think
Right.
I'm pretty good at, inviting
Right.
them to share their stories that add to the conversation.
Right. Okay. Oh, great, Miss Kinda. You're in the Kinder bucket.
Yeah, I would say
So
kind of.
I invite you to continue not to compare yourself to the zero to hero story, because my experience has been, through interacting with thousands of people throughout the years, is probably 80 to 90% of people I meet do not have a zero to hero story. They really don't. What they have is hard struggle. What they have is adversity that, for whatever reason, they've decided to overcome. And it's the little journeys, the little victories that build and build and build that get you to where you are today. And that in itself is incredibly motivational and inspirational. So sometimes there's a throwback, and don't get me wrong, the zero to hero story is actually phenomenal. But I think there's sometimes a throwback of motivational speaker label that was around kind of in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, where you had to go out and motivate, and there was the story and and nothing wrong with that. Again, great. But as people live and things go on, and again, especially in the last couple of years, where people have just had their worlds turned upside down,
Yes.
and survived, I think for some, like you said before, they don't want to seem vulnerable. They don't want to like they had to struggle, or the fact that sometimes they're even struggling now still. But they have the facade, especially if you're a leader. You have the facade where everybody sees the everything fine, everything wonderful. Then behind closed doors, you're still going through those struggles. So I always invite leaders to, wherever appropriate, again, take a look at, share some of those insights, because I always love it when I hear a story, or I give a story, or my clients give stories, and especially, I will celebrate one of my clients that actually gave a major presentation yesterday in Boston. Is Vera. Her name is Vera. I'm going to call her out.
Yes.
She's came from the world of being. She's extremely intelligent, brilliant, and had basically no stories whatsoever. So we've been working for quite some time, and she gave a wonderful presentation, speech yesterday in the Boston area, and people came to her about her stories. And she was shocked. I mean, even though she knew it, and she's done it before, but it's like it was the stories that actually connected her to her audience, they're totally random. They were totally strangers to her. But it was the stories that made her seem human. And that's what audiences need. They need human people. It's nice if you're a hero, but sometimes when you're a hero, people can't relate to you. And I've worked with some leaders and actually professional speakers where they like being the hero. It really makes them feel good, and they like to be admired, and nothing wrong with that. But you get a deeper connection, I believe, when people can say, "Oh, I went through that. Well, me too. Therefore, you know how I feel. Therefore, I'm going to listen and open up to you more, leader, because you're a human being, and you're not being, some leader, some person that's, I wouldn't say fake, but trying to put on a persona that is designed to build me up with little substance. The substance is the little stories that go in between."
Yes. Oh, I love that. And I think that's actually a great segue to something that we spoke about when trying to design this conversation. So we spoke about public speaking as a way to be the face of your company. And you mentioned that it can have a domino effect on your organization. Can you speak to some of the things that come out of taking the time to really hone this skill and leverage it within the workplace and maybe even out?
Right. So many leaders, you're busy being busy at your genius, whether it's organization. Some people have a wonderful, engaging personality, so they do that. And the speaking, sometimes an offshoot. Sometimes I've met leaders who don't think it's really that important. They have their marketing and sales team do that kind of stuff, or PR. People, media staff do that. However, I still don't ever forget the effect that Steve Jobs had on Apple. And he was a very unique, iconic individual, but he was the face, on and off, but he was the face of that organization. And that prompted a culture, promoted a culture that to this day, I'm looking at my iPad right now. You know what I mean? And I know people that you have an eye something. If you have an eye something, you're part of a family. And you sometimes have a certain philosophy that goes with what the company stands for. So it just ties everybody into what you are. And many people will either go with services, go with products. To some extent, maybe it's exactly what the product and the service is about, and it satisfies their needs. But also, too, they do business with you, they interact with you because they like you, or they like the organization and what it stands for. So the clearer you make that, the more obvious you make that by being the face, by learning to enhance your skills so that whenever you go out and you represent the organization, people will say, "Oh, I like her. Yeah, she's cool. I like her. All right, what does she do again? What's the organization? What's the product?" Or especially if you work in the nonprofit realm, that's huge because a lot of people make their decisions whether or not to support the cause due to how they feel about it.
Right.
So if you manage to be eloquent, if you manage to be likable, relatable, then that's more than half the battle as far as getting support for your organization. So it's very, very important that you realize how important your face is. And more, I'm working with leaders that are doing exactly that because they realize you are the face. And then what you also learn in the journey too is, yes, you may be the main face, but it allows you, if you're sharing your experience and stories, encourage your staff and your, I would say, constituents, your shareholders, your stakeholders to do the same. Because we want people that are real, that we do business with, that we learn from, that lead us, and that we're led to. And being authentic, real, and vulnerable, that's where it's at. I'm sorry, but it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, things have changed. Like I said, the old management styles, being autocratic and you being the leader and telling people what to do, and that's been morphing and changing over the years to servant leadership and to other different types of modalities when it comes to leaders. So when you learn to be relatable, doesn't necessarily mean that you're out there sharing and confessing all your stuff to everybody. No, don't do that. You still have the boundaries while you are a leader to make sure that you don't share too much information, but share just enough. And that's the key, because sometimes people don't know where the fine line is.
Yes.
Either you overshare or you undershare. And that's where you can benefit from the association of being with somebody that is objective And I'm not saying that to tote my own horn. It's not about me. Whether you practice in front of your family or other people. Now, here's what I do recommend though. Be very careful sometimes if you're a leader, you may share your stuff with your inner circle. You got to be careful. I'm just going to be honest with you that sometimes they may not tell you the truth though. Because if your skills are not where they need to be, or I've had leaders come to me and there was a speech that they gave and it didn't quite turn up the way they wanted it to be. But when they stepped off stage, their staff said, "Oh, it was great. It was wonderful. It was great." And they're like, "It wasn't. No, it wasn't great." And it had nothing to do with comparison. It really wasn't great. But because your inner circle may be afraid of jeopardizing their position, they're not going to tell you it sucked. They're going to tell you it was bad. They're just going to say, "Well, it was good. It was okay." So that's a bigger conversation as far as who your staff is and all that stuff too. Anyway, let me not go down that road. You want to make sure again that you learn the skills so that when you come off stage, you are relatively happy you gave. You met your objective to a certain extent, and you don't feel embarrassed or feel that something was missing because you didn't prepare enough to speak the way you wanted to. I believe it was Earl Nightingale, and I could be wrong, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but they said there's 3 speeches that we usually give. There's one that we plan to give, there's the one that we actually gave, and there's one we wish we gave. So if you don't plan, the other 2, good luck to you on that one. So learn the skills, and again, one of the main skills that allow you to just cut through all of the mess is storytelling.
I love that. I actually very much love that point you also made about making sure that you have someone within your network, within your space, that's going to give you that constructive, that direct, that's real feedback. Because I've definitely seen firsthand where, a founder, gets off the podium, his people are whooping and hollering, and you're just like, nope. Nope.
Yeah. And it does that person, and I understand, again, it is a very tricky situation to be in if you are part of the circle, to give your leader honest, true feedback. But I think you're doing them a disservice. Even if you can support them, because sometimes it's very hard, especially if they've just come off stage. So you don't want to have them come off stage and say, that was bad. That was
fair.
No, that wasn't really good. No, you don't want to do that. I would support them and give them, of course, positive reinforcement, especially when they come off stage. But maybe down the road, provide constructive feedback. And what I mean by constructive is something they can do something about.
Yes.
Which means if there was confusion, if things were not clear, if if it's technical stuff which they have no control over, then there's nothing they have control over. But if there is a situation where they gave a speech and again it didn't quite come off the way it could have, then be diplomatic, of course, but just approach them from the mindset of, I'm sure you would appreciate objective feedback. So take this with a grain of salt, but here's what I observed as I saw you speak or after I saw you speak. And, you've got to be, again, gentle because I would say people are people first before their job titles, which means if they're easily hurt. Now, sometimes by the time you're a leader, you've got a pretty thick skin, but they still, you can hurt feelings. You can embarrass people. And
yes.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do it.
Yeah.
But there's a way of giving feedback that allows them to take the constructive part of it and work with that and then allow them to build and grow upon that. So, yeah.
I love that. I love it. And I think, I think this leads me to this next question that came up for me. You mentioned vulnerable several times, already in our conversation. Any advice to leaders that are trying to figure out how can I make sure I'm not oversharing, but I'm sharing enough, right? And I actually even have several clients in mind as I share this question. How do you know it's the right amount of vulnerability?
Okay, so emotions are what really, in many cases, drive people's decisions as to whether they like or don't like you, or they want to interact with you, buy from you, etc. Emotions. So if it is something that happened to you in your journey, that is emotional, first, and I'll just walk you through what I want my clients through. I would ask them to think of the situation, think of the story. And then I would have them tell it to me, or if I don't have a chance to be with them immediately, I'd have them record it and send it to me. Now, I want to know, how do you feel as you tell that story? Because if it is the kind of story that is incredibly painful, that it causes you to have a reaction, whether you get sad, you cry, you get upset, or angry, then I'm always hesitant to make sure you do not get yourself into that state, because you don't need to be on stage crying, in a speech. However, what I then do is, after you've told the story, I ask how you feel about it. And if it does cause you to break down, I ask, okay, what is the learning lesson from that story? Which means, after you've experienced all of this, what did you learn from this? And then the next question is, how do you think that lesson can help somebody else? And if there is no lesson, which means it was just incredibly painful and you're still there trying to sort it out and trying to work through your emotions and how you feel about that, then I may hesitate to have you share that story. I probably would not, because you're not complete with that yet. But if it's something you've gone through and you are complete with it, then the questions then come into play. Okay, how long do you have to speak? What is the end result of the total interaction? And the interaction meaning, is it a longer speech? Or is it a short story or anecdote or metaphor that you want to share to, provoke a reaction, to get people to shift? So there's a lot of other factors. I always like to come from the mindset of, if you're sharing a story, you'd like the audience to feel like they're inside your head, and they're looking through your eyes, and they're feeling what you're feeling. And to ask what to share and overshare is a really hard thing to say. There is no hard and fast rule, because it depends on you.
Right.
And depends on your style of communication. And depends on the audience and what they've gone through, because you've got to do all this stuff ahead of time as much as possible. If you share a story that's particularly emotional, you've got to be careful, because again, what is the audience through? Or do they not know you from Adam? But again, what is the major event that you're at? So you always have to look at several other factors besides just, okay, let me just share the story. And the thing is, what is the lesson that's learned? What the way I've shown up in the world as a result of this? How has it allowed me to be successful? And what are these traits that I could share with somebody else that could do the same thing? But it's a little different from you being the hero all the time, which is what I get a lot of. Oh, I remember when I did this and I did that, and people are sometimes very hesitant to show the vulnerability and where they made a mistake. And I say, you know what? My favorite category of speeches that bring the most reaction from people and also the most entertaining and impactful is the category of when I messed up in life and did stuff that nobody knows about.
Oh,
that's the category. That's the category. When I messed up in life and I did stuff that nobody to this day knows about. Now, we're not talking anything criminal or anything that's harmful to anybody else. Don't do that. But I'm talking about stuff that was embarrassing.
Right.
And and I run many a workshop with leaders where I'll have them share those stories. And some of those stories are the most poignant, memorable stories that to this day, they're stories I heard 10, 15 years ago. And I don't necessarily remember the exact, point by point details, but I remember essentially what happened, and it ties me directly to that person. And then sometimes you hear that story, and it may totally explain why they are the way they are today. So it's the little things, again, you don't think they're important, that explain a whole bunch of stuff. So take care, think about them. Run the stories through your brain. When you're thinking of the story, imagine you're closing your eyes and you're watching it like it's a movie in your head. And then you figure out, okay, do I want to share this? I don't know, feel kind of uncomfortable. But again, was it your turning point that allowed you to learn the lesson? Well, if it was, then go ahead and share it. And then the details about it, always ask if there's particular details, does the detail add to the story? Or is it just a time filler? Because if you're walking down the street and the street was dark and there was a street lamp in the corner, okay, hopefully I painted enough pictures so you can imagine me walking down the street towards this light in this dark corner. Versus, okay, well, walking down the street and I'm wearing a green suit with some red shoes and my hair was fly that day, it really, really was. And I was walking down the street and just taking my time, and then I saw this light at the end of the. So, and I was riffing there. All that extra information may not add to the story.
Yeah.
Or it may, depending again on the end result. So it's one of those dances. You just go back and forth and you would, give the information, share the detail, and then figure out, does it add to the story? Yeah, take it out.
I love it. So, and that sounds like where practice comes into play, right? And then also making sure you have people you trust around you to potentially bounce some ideas off of, experts like you to work with them as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I love those pieces. And hopefully all of you listening and those listening to the recording have sort of a checklist now that you can use, especially as it relates to your stories, right? Like, what's that intention? What's the lesson? What's the story, right? How many details do I need to share in order to get this across? All of those, I think, are really important questions to ask yourself when thinking about the story you want to share. So,
another thing.
Oh, please go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to add another thing too. With stories, and especially if you're using them in the context of a speech presentation, understand that the story is meant to guide the listeners to where you want them to go. So I've seen and observed speakers, leaders that use stories because it's all about them. It's me, I'm the star, I'm the speaker. Because look how fabulous I am, and here's my story. And the story will be entertaining and great, but again, sometimes because it's all about the person, and this is sometimes with stories where they are the hero, then listeners get all into that, and they may miss the point of the entire point. Well, the point of the point. They may miss the speech, they may miss the whole intent, because they get wrapped up into, well, she's just telling stories about her. Well, okay. Boring. Or okay. And they switch off. People, they're asking, what's in it for me? How do I relate? What's in it for me? Why should I listen? That's the question they're asking.
Oh, that's actually such a good question for, I think, everyone to keep in mind. Like, what's in it for me? Like, what am I taking away from this? I think that's also should help to clarify whether to share a specific detail or whether or not that story is relevant.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. Well, those of you who are still listening here with us, if any of you have any questions, any thoughts, any experience you want to share, once again, I just want to welcome you to the stage. Just put your hand up and I'll bring you on here with the time that we have left. You're more than welcome to do that between now and 30 minutes past the hour. I'm just taking a look at, the questions that I had, and I feel like we've gone through the majority of them. I think the last question I'd love to ask before we get into maybe learning a little bit more about, your actual services is, one of the things we also talked about in our pre-conversation was sort of how to quickly connect with your audience, regardless of their size. What are your top maybe 3 tips for the reluctant leader who's like, I'm busy, I'm tired, I don't have time, but I know I also need to connect with my audience? What are the top 3 things you would recommend that they focus on, or the top 3 sort of skills or adjacent skills to speaking you suggest they fit into their calendar?
Okay, so I'll probably make this just a general umbrella, is ask questions of them. It's not about you. It's about them. What are they going through? What challenges are they facing right now? And be open to possible solutions they may have with their particular challenges. Because a lot of times I've been in work situations where I felt that what I had to say as an employee didn't matter.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So if you are in the normal, regular habit as a leader of asking of them, and you pay attention to their answers, and if it makes sense, implement or take on some of the suggestions, or especially recognize them for sharing what their issues are, because that's the key. Most of us, we stay quiet because we're like, say nothing, say nothing. I'm gonna say nothing. I'm not gonna be embarrassed, or they're just gonna ignore me.
Mm-hmm.
So if I know, okay, I can. My leaders ask me what's going on, I'll be like, well, and it's a safe space that you're going to, because the best ideal situation will be to create a safe space where you as a leader say, you know what, I know I'm leader, I've got that, great, and I have certain functions to, carry out as leader, and you team have functions too, and we want to make sure that we all work together as a team. So there are times, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be in my ivory tower doing leader things. And I don't realize that probably the people and most of the work and the things that get done are with you, team. So please do the best you can. Feel free to go ahead and share with me what's going on. Tell me. And as a leader, then you get to really, really, really be that objective listener. And that's the key, because most of us, especially leaders, we're doers. We are, we fixers. We're like, okay, let's get it done. And some of us need to probably work on our listening skills. And I say that as being sometimes top of the list. Still, all these years later. And I know better. So they may share information with you that you had no idea about. And then you can take that and do with it what you can, but at least you've opened up the portal as far as communication for both ways. You've shared. If they give suggestions, even if the suggestions are totally off the wall, please appreciate them for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Because many organizations will tell you that some of the secrets of their success have been things that have been shared from their staff that do the job every day, whatever that looks like. And they see things and hear things and come up with solutions that would make far more sense than me, Mrs. Leader, that's sitting in my ivory tower, being totally disconnected from what the organization is, because I've got my own, set of things to do. So I would say, just ask them what's going on in their world. What are they going through? Ask them if they've got issues and challenges, and then if they feel bold, solutions. Many, many years ago, I did a leadership workshop in Tennessee, and it was a hospital, a CEO that had just taken over the hospital that was up there. And he was probably been on the job about a month, and he decided to bring his entire C-suite staff to my workshop because he could see where there were issues with communication before. So I did not know the total backstory. I just knew that he had his staff there, and I went through and did what I did. And part of it was to have them go through an exercise where I gave them a fictitious situation and then divided everybody into teams. And I want to say there was about 20 people total for the workshop, and divided them into teams of 3 and 4. And then gave each team a very specific role. So team 1, you were production. Team 2, you were the warehouse, whatever it was. And I gave them the scenario. And then I put, we had the equivalent of like whiteboards on the wall. And I gave them a scenario. And basically I had each department come up with a solution for this one problem. So then they had 15 minutes or whatever it was to come up with a solution. They put their solutions on the board, and then we sat back. And it was amazing, number one, to see the different perspectives that each department had on the same problem. Then I had them swap and say, okay, how could you add to, say, production? How could you add to the warehouse's solution? And what they did was added to each other's answer, pretending that they were them. And that was so creative and inspiring to the CEO that what he did, I heard at lunchtime that day, because it was a day-long thing, was that he booked out his conference rooms in the hospital.
Wow.
And for the following week, that's what he planned to do with his major departments. So a lot of times it's about communicating and providing a safe space and not being in silos where everybody's kind of fighting for their own, position and jockeying and not listening to and communicating with each other. So you as the leader, I think should probably help to facilitate that so that, communication throughout is better. And then you are going to be the portal to spear that off. That was a long answer.
Yes, absolutely love that, Jen. And I think everyone listening to this, those listening to the recording, and like I said, I will be sharing this with some of my clients specifically. I think there's a lot that they can take from just what you've shared there. So thank you so much. Once again, I just want to, this is the last call. Anyone listening live, if any of you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'd love to have you join us on stage and ask. Jen, what's next for you? What are you excited about this summer? What are you looking forward to doing with the rest of this year? Because we're halfway through the year, if you can believe it.
I know. This is one of those years, and I say every single year, and it seems like every year just goes by faster.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. So for me, particularly, I'm, again, excited about my business, which is working with clients. I work one-on-one with a lot of leaders that run successful organizations, all in different phases, though. Some are multi-million-dollar entities, some not quite there. But again, the leaders have decided, okay, we need to change the way we communicate. I as a leader, I'm going to kind of spearhead that. And then it's trickling down to the organization as well. So I'm doing some work one-on-one and doing some group information, some group work too, to help them and their staff. Then I will probably be holding my own in-person one-on-one intensive retreat. And I say one-on-one, but it's going to be us in a mansion. Probably it looks like now that I will hold it probably January of 2024, where those of you leaders that are really, really serious about getting your stories down and really infusing them in the way that you communicate normally, get to spend some time with me, probably a good 3 or 4 days, where you bring your stuff, and it's going to be exclusive to probably about no more than 10 people, and you spend time and work your stuff out. So I kind of do that already, but I like the idea of just going away somewhere and being able to really hone and focus on that. So that's what we'll be doing. I may be doing a little bit of work overseas, in Europe, possibly the Middle East, working with some leaders on their leadership stuff. So I'm kind of excited. It's going to be, one of those, or how's this going to work out? But it's going to be a good time, and everybody's going to benefit from it.
Sounds super exciting. Well, Jen, thank you so much for joining me today. And everyone listening live, thank you so much for joining as well. Please make sure that you connect with Jen, aka Jennifer Samuel Chance. All you have to do is click on those 3 little dots that appear when you hover over her beautiful image. If you have any questions, any thoughts, please feel free to connect with her. And, Jen, just once again, want to say thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for your thoughts. I'm really excited about a lot of the things that I've shared here, or I've heard you share here, and I'm excited to also share this conversation with my clients. So thank you so much.
And thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this wonderful, wonderful platform, because the information that you shared here, not just me, but the other cast too, are amazing. So I have to bow down to you, my dear, and congratulate you for such a wonderful forum to help people grow and do what they do better.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Also, just want to call out Dr. Alex Rosa who's listening. Thank you for joining. She was one of our guests a few weeks ago. So thank you for taking the time to join us for a bit here. Jen, once again, thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing weekend. I hope you all listening have an amazing weekend, and I will see you next time. Thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of your day.